Sarah,
Yeah.
how are you feeling?
Not great.
Oh, really? Why not?
I don't know.
Maybe it's because of heterosexual relationships.
Yeah, maybe. Let's do a podcast about it and find out.
Okay, sounds good.
Welcome to Mistakes Were Made, a podcast about non-monogamy for messy people like us. I'm Sarah. I'm a queer, non-monogamous therapist, parent, and writer who, speaking of toxic masculinity and gender relations, has a WrestleMania hangover this AM.
I would argue that it's not toxic. It's just expressive masculinity. But anyway, I'm her husband and co-host Alex. I am a compulsory heterosexual. It's a term I just learned. We'll talk about it more later.
I'm Jessica, resident monogamist. And I'm queer, especially because last night I stayed up late installing new shelving racks in my cabinets at home. I had to use a power drill, power screwdriver, and everything. So butch, you guys.
It's really queer.
Wow.
So queer.
Yeah. Wow.
What queer things are you going to put on those shelves?
Casserole dishes?
And sex toys.
Oh, sex toys. Yeah, thanks.
Obviously.
And sex
Wait, but if I installed those shelves, it wouldn't be queer, right?
Well, I mean, it was actually making me grapple with my gender identity a lot because I have an irrational fear of using a power drill. And I always...
But not a sex toy.
Oh, no, sex toys, no problem.
And not sex toys
Similar.
attached to power drills.
Yeah.
But
Oh, no,
Right.
that's
Yeah, I was
fine.
gonna say,
Very
similar
totally,
technology.
Yeah.
Clearly, I don't know anything about sex toys.
Alex, the answer to that question of whether or not it would make you queer to be doing that late at night is probably entirely dependent on whether or not you were wearing those Italian, like 1980s Italian sunglasses. while you were doing
And like
it.
really short cut-off shorts, maybe.
Just even like the whole
Yeah.
outfit that you were wearing
Yeah,
to Easter
the wardrobe determines. You liked my Easter outfit?
because it was like butterfly collar, cardigan, like dark cardigan, and then these like 1970s like black rimmed sort of aviator style. I thought of them as being like very Italian professor sunglasses. So
Yeah, I was disappointed that the Easter brunch that we showed up to was not in Tuscany.
but instead shoreline.
Shoreline. Yeah. The Tuscany of the Pacific Northwest. Anyway, what are we
Yeah.
talking about today? What's
All right,
going on?
yeah, what
Not
are
my
we
wardrobe,
talking about?
but maybe we should post a picture of that on our Instagram.
We definitely should.
Okay.
Yes, this is a very special episode. Throughout the past 5 years of us having this podcast and being open, like a big theme of ours has been exploring like the relationship between men and women, like ours as material and then ours with other partners as material. And like, I feel like I've been kind of at the center of that sometimes, you know, like my predictable insecurity and anger towards men and like my kind of like push-pull of why do I date them and am I going to keep dating them?
Will she or won't she?
Will she or won't she? The answer is
Stop dating
she definitely will keep dating men, but she will also keep threatening to stop.
Yeah.
And I guess recently, Alex, I've heard you kind of talking about recognizing similar patterns in yourself and in relationships, and maybe like some similar frustrations and like some of this like more existential, like, what am I doing and why questioning of how the same themes just like keep coming back for you. And so I thought that it would be interesting for us to tackle this kind of directly instead of indirectly and explore where we're at. Like, what have we noticed about our dynamic as a man and a woman in love with each other? And also, like, how that gets repeated in our other relationships, like opposite sex relationships.
Heterosexual relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always, like, kind of hesitant to use that term for my relationships because I'm queer.
Oh,
You
but
know?
a relationship can be heterosexual, right?
I don't know. I mean, that's why I'm hesitant, is that it
Interesting.
doesn't feel like exactly the right fit. But I mean, it's like,
Huh.
it is kind of a
Yeah.
straight relationship, but
Right. Well, and straight might be might mean something
term.
different too. So let's avoid talking about this by digging into the semantics for 45
I would
minutes.
love that. Yes, please. Part one, semantic framing.
Semantics, yes. Definition of terms. Hours 1 through 3. No, okay, I'll let that go. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, and not just because we planned a little bit for this episode. But also, yeah, I've been noticing, I think like as time goes on, as you're saying, like you start to notice like patterns in the more relationships you have and the more of them like begin and end and have an arc, you notice more of like what the patterns are and start to see those patterns as like, okay, it's not, something to do with this specific relationship, the specific person, or even like with me specifically, but maybe like, especially when you observe other people having the same kinds of challenges, then you start to realize that like maybe those are patterns. And then it can lead to some hopelessness, maybe, if it feels like everything is kind of like, no matter who the new person is, it's always, the same kind of things come up.
The material feels the same. So
Yeah.
like, let's stop here and talk about like, what is the material?
Yeah.
What are
material.
a little bit the patterns that we've noticed? I can go first if you want.
Okay, go ahead.
I guess like the material that I find myself encountering over and over and over again in my relationships with men, it's a little bit the sense that the early part of a relationship will be like really fun and gratifying and like intense and satisfying because I'm going to get like a lot of kind of attention from the man. And like there's a lot of them working hard to kind of like mostly get to have sex with me. And then like once once you kind of like get to this point where you've established some kind of intimate or physical relationship, that then I become like really kind of vigilant about the quality or intensity of that attention, like waning or changing. And I think especially in polyamory, like, and the men I date, there will be other women and there will be lots of them. And so then once the intimate, romantic, physical relationship is kind of onboarded, I start increasingly feeling like vigilant about making sure that I'm like still getting that attention or like at the center of the man's attention. And this is not all of me, but it's just like the patterns I notice, like the things that show up, right? The shadowy things that show up. And that like will be intensified by, men I date tend to date lots of other women. And so new women in relationships will come on and I will start feeling like kind of insecure about that. And because of who I am, I also tend to hide those feelings because I find them embarrassing. I also don't want to be vulnerable that way.
Pride.
Okay, we could call it pride. Yes, sure.
One of the deadly sins.
We could call it a deadly sin if we wanted to.
That doesn't sound judgmental. I'm sorry.
I think it's also like protective. And so then I'll grow like a little bit distant or like I just like kind of get into like a more like emotionally removed posture to kind of like feel protective of myself. And then like the man senses that and they, often will feel like angry or resentful or confused about it. And we have like some kind of struggles around communication about that. So that's like one piece of the material.
Okay, that was a lot right there.
I have more pieces.
Okay, just to pause and unpack that, or do you want to keep going?
Okay, I'll stop.
Oh,
I don't want you to stop, but I just want to like summarize because you identified like this sort of like two sort of cliches. One like that in the front end of a relationship with a man, the man is like putting forth a lot of effort to try to get you to sleep with them, and you are like feel like you have to put forward less effort.
Yeah, it's kind of like I get to show up as my like full kind of more wild self almost in a way, because I don't have a lot at stake in this point in the relationship. I don't really care whether or not we get to sex and like emotional romantic intimacy. Like, and this is probably more of a me thing.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just like, yeah, please let's not get there so I don't have to get to the second part, which fucking sucks. You know?
Because you're saying the second part is that then after that's happened, they sort of lose interest and or are pursuing it, like interest wanes, and then they start pursuing it, that same thing elsewhere.
Yeah.
And then
especially if you can't like escalate the relationship, which as like a 45-year-old married mother, I can't, you know? And so I also have typically dated men who are a few years younger than me and like single or live alone. And so that question of whether or not they're like going to find a relationship that can escalate and keep escalating is always there. So it like adds to some of the atmospheric
relatable for sure.
Pressure. And yeah, I want to just like take responsibility for the first part of that cycle. I love it. And I love that part of like meeting and being with men because I feel so free to be myself. Because if we don't get to the point of having like a big relationship, I am like almost relieved. But I also have kind of restricted myself from like exploring that too much, you know? And so the times when I've like really let myself indulge, which is what it feels like in that part where like the man is just kind of like, oh, I don't know, just like lavishing you with like attention and interest, which I always know is a manipulation. And so I don't want to like indulge you know, but I'll let myself do it when I'm having a hard time. So like the last...
Oh, like having a hard time in the rest of your life.
In the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And the last couple of times that I've done it, you can like really see that I was like struggling with like often like loss and grief is a big motivator for me, but sometimes like struggling in other ways. And I'll be like, I'm just going to like give myself this, even though it's kind of a manipulation and it's kind of toxic and it's probably not going anywhere good.
I'm curious about those last parts. Like, you feel like it's a manipulation? Like
in a large sense. I don't mean that in the sense of like there's something malevolent about the man. I think just like in the kind of the dance that men and women do. You know?
I mean, because I would say from my experience, when I'm bringing that energy, that kind of energy on the front end of a relationship, it's often because I'm like trying to like establish intimacy. Like obviously, you know, sexual intimacy, but like that is meaningful beyond just like even in the basest way, somebody being like, I guess there's a really misogynist way that this could be playing out, where you're just like, I'm just trying to get this lady to have sex with me. But like the want of that on the man's side is perhaps not like, it could not be manipulative. It could be like, just like a pursuit of connection.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's many things at once. Like, I think it's a pursuit of connection, but often, and like, you know, this may be my own sort of like fear and resentment talking, it's not as though men can maintain that level of interest and curiosity and attention past the having onboarded the connection, the intimacy, and the sex.
Right. It has to do with it. Yeah. The part that feels like a manipulation is the second part that you described, where then they go and pursue that somewhere else. Or,
right. It's like, again, this is not everyone. I'm talking about my experience. I'm not trying to universalize everything, but it sometimes feels like maybe I am often with men who are really, really interested in that part of the cycle, or maybe like men culturally are really interested in that part of the cycle. I've already admitted that there's a part of me that is interested in that part of the cycle too. So it's not like I don't understand how compelling it is.
Yeah.
But I do find that ultimately I end up in a posture that feels vigilant and like sort of insecure.
Right.
As part of the relationship, and I don't like it.
Yeah, you're saying it feels like it isn't gonna last, and then it seems like you're saying that once it doesn't last, that you withdraw, and then that withdrawing evokes a reaction from them that is like,
I mean, sometimes
sort
the
of like-
reaction is, yeah, okay, fine, I don't care.
Right.
And then I'm like, all right, bye, end of relationship.
And sometimes it's renewed interest in trying to like resolve that.
Yeah, sort of. But I mean, there's a lot of anxiety in there. I wouldn't say that it like creates, I mean, there's like push-pull for sure. But it's like an anxious dynamic, not like the fun, not the fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just trying to think about like how they're like sort of pursuing what maybe feels like secure attachment with you. Like how the security like is almost feeling like a zero-sum game kind of. Like they don't have it and you have it at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then they get it and then you don't have it. And then, like you're kind of going back and forth.
It's like such a toxic psychodrama entirely based on the idea that women are supposed to protect sex against the pursuits of men.
Right.
And that's where their power is.
Yeah.
And then once they have relinquished that to men, the men have the power.
Right.
Like, it's very stupid.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to critique you specifically. I just wanted to like dig into that.
You call me stupid? Well, you're stupid too.
Wait, I didn't say it. Did I say stupid? I think you said stupid. So what about the other part of it before I interrupted you? You were about to say something else like 5 minutes ago.
Two other things. I think one of them is like when men I date much younger women, that in and of itself is just a source of anxiety and resentment, which again, I have to just be honest about having without like pushing some moral agenda on that behavior. And I think that that's a distinction that is sometimes hard.
Right.
I don't want to take like a value stance on like that, big age gaps in dating that like run.
Yeah, and we did a whole episode about
We did
this.
a whole episode about it. And I think there's a lot of complexity there. But I will just say that is like a source of anxiety for me. And it plays into like, obviously, ageism and misogyny and the idea of like who are like sort of high value women and what are high value feminine bodies. And also just like reproductive viability, which then like touches back on earlier concerns that, I am not actually of value to men past my reproductive and sexual value to them. And then the third piece that is hard for me, there's more pieces, but I would say these are the top three. I'm just really jealous of men's power and experiences in the world. And that's not because I have a misunderstanding of how it is also hard to be a man. Like, I think I do know that, not from personal experience, but from like loving and caring for a lot of men and a lot of observation and through certainly my experience with male clients. But there is just a way that like men have a kind of physical freedom in the world. They have an assumed value in the world. They have like an ability to like make certain types of mistakes and be careless and correct for them that feels like very tied to power related to their gender. And it is one thing for me to feel that with men who are friends or relatives, and it's like something I navigate, but it doesn't feel like a fucking knife to my sternum. But when I experience it or witness it in romantic, intimate relationships with men, it is really, really like a violent anger at times that I mostly, again, keep to myself.
Just stab yourself.
I just stab myself in the sternum because people don't like to hear about that kind of thing. And yeah, so those are, the patterns that I've noticed about like what will make it hard for me, and like anxiety then like starts mounting. And as you can hear in the way I'm describing this, I will kind of suppress it because it's really unpredictable how my partners might respond, or I perceive that it will be really unpredictable. And it also feels vulnerable because it exposes the things that I feel most insecure about. And so that doesn't like help with closeness and security. And so like, the arc of the relationship starts to feel like one where there's just like more and more difficult material and more like insecurity and less ability to actually successfully communicate that. And
more and more distance.
And more distance. And like this is where I feel despair. And this is, hopefully we end up somewhere else by the end of the episode. But I don't know what the interventions are. I can't.
Yeah.
It starts to feel kind of inevitable. And you can learn these patterns and you can learn about yourself and you can make different decisions about what you do with the distress. But the distress starts to feel very inescapable.
Right. Yeah. And you're describing the distress in and of itself as being a source of tension because it is unevenly distributed between you and the male partner.
Yes. Yeah. Which I guess is now a good segue into you talking about what you've noticed as your patterns of distress in relationships with women.
I would say that is a hard act to follow. But related material. The things I was going to say that I have written down here from before you said all of that were about trying to this pattern of wanting to be able to recognize, name and disrupt the uneven power dynamic between me and a female partner. Knowing that is there, and typically I would be dating people who also, know that is there on an intellectual level. I'm definitely only dating people who are would self-identify as feminists and are thinking about these kinds of things, right? It's not we need to unearth these truths from the very beginning, but they're kind of apparent in a lot of the media that we're consuming and the ways that we're thinking about things, and yet it's very hard to not have them play out and to interrupt them. And I'm always kind of being what can I do or say to make this less of a thing? How can we communicate on the front end, or even who can I date that this will be less of a thing? That makes sense.
What is the what?
The power dynamic. The idea that we can't meet each other in some sort of even way because of the sort of inherent power that I have as who I am, my gender, but other dimensions of that, and who they are and the life experiences that they've inevitably had coming from that position. And then it's kind of what is left there if you can't do that. What very commonly comes up is the power play of the relationship being pointing towards the sort of escalatory monogamous tendencies of kind of what you were describing at the front end of being chosen, me bringing a lot of energy. What they can do to even the power is sort of draw out of me a lot of devoted, adoring, untethered romantic energy. Right? Which I guess is kind of what you just said, right? A bunch of enthusiasm.
Yeah, and I guess the way that manifests and how people like it depends on taste. But yeah.
Yeah, and that can show up a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's just this is much more of a sexual relationship, and we're gonna immediately put that inside of a sort of sexual container and both say we're both choosing to do this, and we're gonna show up there, and everything is gonna all of that power stuff is gonna kind of play out inside of that container, which to be honest is a lot more comfortable and safer than it being the entire material of the relationship is kind of are we doing this or not? Do I like you enough? Do you like me enough?
You mean if the question of value, power, and commitment are all concentrated into a container around sex, you feel more secure?
Yeah,
and
I think
there's
so.
Romantic emotional attachment at play, it becomes more unmanageable.
Because the stakes are higher. like obviously the stakes in sex can feel really, really high, but when it's sort of like a, you know, and I think this can play out also in the decision, like you're saying, the decision like whether or not to even have sex, right? Like that can be this push-pull thing, or it can just be like, this is what we're doing, and we've kind of just like both. There's only like the two options, like both people can just be like yes or no, and then if they both are saying yes, and we know that that's what we're doing, then it's kind of like a simpler dynamic.
I wonder if it is for women though.
Yeah, I don't know.
I say that with honest, it's not a rhetorical question, with honest curiosity. And I'm sure that it's different for different people. But again, it's not as though the power dynamics in sex between men and women are somehow more equal or less complex.
No, they're certainly not more equal. I think what I'm saying is the inequality is like laid bare.
In what
Bare
way?
naked.
Bare. Thank you, Jessica. Thank God you're here. Yes, bare naked. You know, like just not to be too explicit or whatever, but like if you're in a situation like that and you can like have a frank conversation about like, what do you like? And often the answer will be like, I want you to like push me up against a wall and be physically powerful with me. Like that's a level of, you know, it's like a physical manifestation of these like unequal power dynamics that just being able to like opt into it. I don't know. It's like, it's not even maybe worth comparing the two things because they're very different, but it's,
you know, we were talking about this before we started the podcast, and I don't know. Again, I can't universalize these things. People have different feelings about sex and vulnerability and power, and they cut different ways across gender. I will say that for me, the idea that someone I don't know that well, and early on, I would be like, I would like you to use a lot of physical power against me in sex. Just in this container, feel safe. Really, really hard to picture. And I know that like lots of people feel differently. And obviously, I know that through your experience in the world, at least vicariously. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that, except that it doesn't resonate with me. I don't tend to have just sexual relationships with men in part because of that. It would take so long for me to actually trust that container that I wouldn't even know how to build it without there being some kind of emotional attachment element. I mean, probably that's possible. And if anybody out there wants to try, come find me. But
what about me? I think that sometimes when women do decide that they want to do that, it's because they're trying to like they don't want to fuck with all this other stuff. Right? I can see how it's like vulnerable and is maybe not for everyone, but I think sometimes it's like I don't want to have or maybe like it's like feeling like their value is like very clearly manifest in that kind of relationship, and they're just like, so this is a good place for me to be like a safe place for me to be exploring, as opposed to like existential emotional place. Like, am I fundamentally loved?
you know, this is, I just hate it all. I think that's what we're getting at. I don't like any of it. Like, I don't, I hate all of it.
Pull the plug. Stop recording. This is over.
Nope.
Sarah's fucking over it.
Big note for me.
Okay. Well, maybe we should move on.
Well, but for a moment, I guess, I feel a little bit like I was more vulnerable in my reveal of the kinds of patterns and like insecurities that I have in my description than you were, because I feel like you were like, oh yeah, I can a little bit relate to that piece, and now I'm going to tell you about all the hot sex I'm having with ladies who want to throw them around. So,
I mean,
back in the hot seat, Alex.
Okay, is it possible that is because I have more inherent power in these relationships because I'm a man?
Yeah.
So there's less vulnerable material.
if listeners, if you could see the look on Sarah's face right now. I think that's what
I
they
am
call
not overextending my emotional labor in this conversation. You got to come towards me a little bit.
Okay.
Give me more.
So I guess I am just. Could you repeat the question?
Jesus fucking Christ. The setup for this episode is that.
What is hard about relationships between men and women?
Yeah, and what are the
for me?
patterns that you are noticing that like make you feel kind of enough distance or anxiety or distress that you ask yourself like, why am I doing it?
Yeah.
That was the question that I was answering.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think it's because it's like the same, it just feels like the same thing over and over again where I like lose any sense of like that it matters who I am at all, right? If I'm just like showing up in a relationship as like a manifestation of power, whether like physically or like access to societal power or whatever, I sort of like cease to be a human being. And like I know that sounds like a
Keep going.
like not very much to complain about as compared to what you were complaining about. You know, like annihilation, I think was the word.
Physical and emotional annihilation.
But perhaps there's the spiritual annihilation. No, you know, it's just like doing the same thing over and over again. And then like I think I get if I don't do the thing that is like buying into the like a really kind of like chaotic escalatory adoration, devotion, like destabilization, like romance, I'm just like pouring myself into this relationship. If I try to have like a boundaried relationship, then I feel like oftentimes I sort of like get punished for it, or like the other person like wants that until they realize, you know, or maybe I do it to some extent, but as soon as I like hold back, then they bail and go find it somewhere else.
Right.
And it's not, you know, like, and the like theme of this episode is kind of like, you know, why bi women would be dating men, or like you're questioning that. It is not. I've never had a relationship with a woman end because she stopped dating men and only wanted to date women because dating men was too hard. I've had lots of relationships end because the woman wanted to go date a man who was going to be either monogamous with them or just be more fully kind of like in it. And there's a critique that I'm sure many of my exes would give that like, you know, this has to do with me being like emotionally repressed or something like that. Or perhaps like overly devoted to our relationship to the extent that they would never get what they needed in it. But it also can feel like, you know, it has to do with having boundaries that are like maybe not, I mean, I don't think it's actually giving power, but it is kind of like, it's like mimicking that.
I mean, this reminds me of what we were talking to.
Is that better?
Yes. Thank you.
Great, because I feel terrible.
Thank you, Alex. That's what I was looking for.
Perfect.
Join me. Thank you. And if you're interested in reaching out to me to be your individual therapist, you can find me at...
Not legal.
I feel terrible.
Yeah.
Sarah Studeville.
I feel terrible therapy. PLLC.
I feel terrible. Yes, stay there. Stay there. God, sorry.
Yeah. Well, and then like, I guess to just keep going, since I'm on a roll, like the attempt to disrupt this, you know, over the course of the 5 years that I've been dating other people, I've like realized that these dynamics are much more common in relationships with people who haven't already like had a family, who are younger, women who are younger, and who are maybe going to be more like compelled by that kind of dynamic.
You mean like women for whom the question of biological like reproduction is still and parenting is still on the table?
Yeah.
Just like from an age and stage perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's like that's the thing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't even have to be the actual thing. Like, you know, I'm not getting anybody pregnant biologically at this point.
But like the psychodrama, the interplay, the things that are happening between men and women are going to have a different like flavor and dynamic based on like age and stage of life.
Yeah.
And,
so at some point I was just like, I'm sticking to moms wherever possible, like basically. And, you know, it is better in fundamental ways. Like, you know, no offense to people who are moms, but it's better for me.
In what way?
Because there's just less of that.
They're not like actively wondering if there might be like a man out there to hitch their life to and ride off into the sunset with in like the most kind of like romance myth type of way, because they've probably already done some version of that and been met with a lot of complexity.
Yes. Yeah, and I want to be careful to frame this as like not a thing that other people are necessarily actually doing, a thing that could be like internal to me.
Yeah.
But my anxiety tends to be that like that is what everybody wants, or like what a lot of people want, what draws a lot of people like into relationships, what draws a lot of women into relationships with men is like some version of this, like this idea of romantic escalation. And even in a poly context, and even in a poly context, even if like, you know, I say and like, you know, message with my behavior all of the right things about like my commitment to my life as it is and like my lack of desire to do any of that. Like that material is just still kind of there.
Yeah.
Sort of no matter what. Like everybody wants to be fucking chosen.
But what does that mean? I mean, we say that with like such sort of casual assumption, but outside of the romance myth of the idea that you kind of like find the ideal person, are chosen, contract into one version of your relationship, and then carry it to death. Like, what are we talking about when we say we want to be chosen?
I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think one of you mentioned this idea earlier. I mean, it can often feel like basically, you know, a referendum on your inherent lovability value as a person, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
This conversation has also been making me feel really bad. So thanks, guys.
Hopefully also all the listeners.
You're welcome.
But yeah, and I don't even know. I was like, sorry if this is sort of a tangent or whatever, but I just found myself thinking about dating. And like, I think maybe I hate that first part of the cycle. I think my pattern was to sort of like, just like push through it and get to like the next stage really quickly before I even determined whether I liked the person at all. But like, I just wanted to like get that whole like, maybe I'd like also slept with people pretty soon. Right. But it was kind of to just release that. I was like, I don't want to do this. Like, can we just like be real?
Go
like,
straight to the like companionship part.
See
that
what is actually here. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I believe that about you.
Yeah. It's just fascinating. I was just thinking about my reputation for like not sleeping with men in particular. It's only just men until like 6 or 7 dates.
Yeah.
And,
right.
Like,
which is like
unheard of. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's in part because I am like trying to draw out this part of it. And I'm like, once we get into like physical sex and intimacy and like potential emotional attachment, everything is going to start going haywire. And I would like to stretch out this part before the haywire as long as possible.
Right.
Or like maybe you just determine that you're not going to go there with the person and then it's also over. But you know, like
Yeah. Well, and like you were just referencing, Jessica, the feeling of being the validation of like being kind of chosen, and like, to be fair, you know, that is certainly like a thing for me, as much as I'm like trying to say that like I don't want that kind of relationship, like meeting new people and having them like be excited about spending time with me, being in a relationship with me, having sex with me, like all of that is like very
feels good.
It feels good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is it feels good until you actually have to deliver on any of that.
Right.
Then it gets complicated. That's all I'm saying.
So maybe we should bring it back to, is this just a thing between men and women? Like, because it kind of could sound like we're talking about just like sort of attachment in general.
And like new relationship energy and stuff like that. No, I think that there really is a quality of this that is gendered. And I think like at heart, this is what we are often talking about on this podcast, is like what is the material between men and women when you get outside of these very, very heavily scripted arcs of what we're doing with each other. And like some of it is fucking toxic. And like I think we do actually have to look at it for being that way, so that we can find the parts
you
that
can
aren't.
look at it once you're outside of the toxic arcs.
Think so?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, in a world where men and women are pushed together in a certain way, basically to reproduce and, like, pass down property and promote capitalism.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's like, what is there between us? And I think, like, you looking at that, like, kind of frankly is important. And there's, like, some of that stuff is uncomfortable.
Yeah, maybe this is a good time to talk about the article that came out recently in The Cut that was called, "If Heterosexual Relationships Are So Bad, Why Do Women Go Back for More?"
Blame the victim much?
Yeah. Yes, totally. Your
Wow,
hot
I
take
am
is...
so fucking activated right now. It was like a cacophony of people saying some similar version of that to me, just like went off in my head.
Oh no, yeah.
Yeah. Right. You're saying you were saying earlier that this is like a question that has been asked
Everyone's
to you.
like, stop fucking talking about it if you're gonna keep doing it.
Right.
And I'm just like, excuse me.
Right. And they're like, since you have bi privilege or whatever,
Yes, this event's bi privilege.
The greedy bisexual.
I mean, I've heard straight women say this too, to me even, being like, you know, I wish I wasn't straight, but I am, so I'm stuck on this date with you.
That is actually, to me, a super annoying take that straight women have.
So in this article, they talk about this as...
But they say it all the time.
As
common refrain.
Heteropessimism. Straight women's performative expression of regret, embarrassment, and hopelessness about their hetero lives. And then they mentioned...
that was called heteropessimism?
Heteropessimism. But they call it performative not because it's insincere, but because it's rarely accompanied by the actual abandonment of straight relationships.
What? Like, how dare they?
Yeah, that paradigm, that framing seems incredibly unfair.
What?
They're like, take it or leave it, bitch. This is what it's like. If you don't like it, then, you know, get lost.
Then, like, you don't get to have sex, you know, or like, come on.
Okay.
I was so mad.
This is upsetting you guys so much. Okay, so this is all coming from this article focuses on this feminist studies professor named Jane Ward, who's the chair of the feminist studies department at University of California, Santa Barbara, which is like actually also America's #1 party school. I don't know if that's a coincidence. She wrote a book called The Tragedy of Heterosexuality, and she is a lesbian woman who has been in relationships with men in the past. I think
I really want that T-shirt.
The tragedy of heterosexuality.
Yeah.
So it's like, however you want to respond to like the framing and stuff like that. Like this whole class that she's teaching is supposed to be like taking the academic lens of queer studies that traditionally has looked at queer relationships as like queer, weird, different,
Right.
And pointing that sort of interrogation onto heterosexual relationships and being like, you want to know why people are gay? Well, why the fuck are people straight?
Right. And this actually makes me think about something that has been in the ether a little bit, is this question of like, does heterosexuality exist in the form?
I think that was the alternative title of this article.
Okay.
Is heterosexuality real? It's one of those articles that has two different titles in different places.
A/B testing.
Yeah.
Or is our expression of it just like a kind of a social cultural trope,
Right.
essentially? And like we don't understand or can't really think about opposite sex relationships outside of that context.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hurdle.
I'm reading this quote from Danny.
It's one of the students in her class.
I'm feeling
Yeah, read it.
a lot of self-recognition. There's a lot of self-recognition in it, so can I read it? Danny, a psychology and brain sciences major from Dallas, who is bisexual. This sounds like the opening of a porno.
Oh my god! It's just because she's from Dallas.
Danny
does Dallas.
Bisexual psychology.
She's like,
Danny
"Study
sounds
brain
awesome.
science."
She sounds hot.
Okay, sorry. Shit.
Wow.
That's not staying in. Okay.
We'll go into the show notes. We'll put a picture of Danny that I'm drawing on the back of my script right now.
Danny, a psychology and brain sciences major from Dallas who is bisexual, confessed that she'd observed herself behave in ways that disturbed her when she dated men. She was more submissive, more self-conscious, inattentive to her own needs, and wanted to understand why.
Yeah.
And I think that's an experience that a lot of women have, and it's interesting from the perspective of bi women because we do have like some comparison. Like we can notice how we show up differently
Right.
in our relationships with men.
Right.
And that I see myself in that. More submissive, more self-conscious, and less attentive to my own needs. Almost out the fucking gate. By the time we're on date 7, where probably that's when like, if P&V is going to happen, that's when it's happened, and we're off to the races with more submissive, more self-conscious, and inattentive to my own needs.
So up until that point, you're not. You're saying you're
Yep.
like a lot more free, and then once you get
Yep.
to that point,
Yep.
yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yep. And then it's just...
And then from date 7 until year 20 of marriage, it's just inattentive to your own needs. No. Yeah. For real.
I mean, and yeah, these behaviors are so familiar to just thinking about witnessing my femme friends in relationships with men.
Yeah.
I see them doing
that.
this all the time.
It's interesting, though, Alex, to touch back on, you know, when you were feeling really bad and talking about
She's like, let's go back to that.
how you feel negated. Like,
When I was feeling bad in the past tense.
you were talking about boundaries and this
Yeah.
feeling like you can't actually have them or you don't know how to express them successfully with women without it being perceived as rejection or like a failure to deliver on your end of the romance myth that women are looking for.
Yeah.
So I would say this is maybe the inversion of that like that sense that
Yeah.
women often have, that they have to like lose touch with themselves, can't express boundaries successfully. Like to do so would be to not make good on our side of the like toxic romance myth. And that like we will kind of lose whatever we're here to gain by doing that.
Yeah. And then also, if I'm aware of that and can see that happening on their side, then it, you know, the reflection of that is also unpleasant. Right? Like if I want to be in a relationship with a human being and that human being feels like they have to be submissive, self-conscious, and inattentive to their own needs in order to be in a relationship with me, then that also sucks for me. Sucks for the relationship as a whole and for our unit. And I think that's kind of what I was trying to say. It is like a jump ahead, obviously, to be like, when here's what's hard about it for me is a bad boo-hoo, you know. It's like less hard, but it is, you know, like this in this thing that the person says, this is another quote, Ward, the professor, finds that straight relationships are full of contradictions, antagonism, and boredom, that they're erotically uninspired, paralyzed by punishing gender expectations, and burdened by countless daily injustices.
Yes.
And like,
this one we got to come back to. Put a pin in that for our upcoming episode, Fuck Sex.
yeah. The end of sex.
No, I think like the kind of like punishing gender norms that show
Yeah.
up also in sex.
Yeah. So what I wanted to say is like in the article, she's talking about this as the experience of women, straight women, in relationships. But when I read that, I was also like, yes, right? Like, contradictions, antagonism, boredom, like, and even
You stopped at erotically uninspired. Paralyzed by punishing gender
but even
expectations. Keep going.
even paralyzed by punishing gender expectations. Like, obviously, all of that is talking about the experiences of women, but like it and the injustices, like those things still like affect the dynamic in a relationship. They affect me too, even if like I'm kind of like positioned as the perpetrator of those injustices or whatever.
Well,
like,
patriarchy is.
yeah, exactly. Patriarchy is.
The thing that's wild about being poly is that you can, for a while, just be like, oh, this was just like bad chemistry with this person. Oh, the alchemy is off. Oh, I was immature. Oh, they were immature. There were life circumstances that led to this. But after 6 years,
Yeah.
you're like, oh, this shit is just this shit.
Yeah.
Like, and there is no, like, I am not going to find a man where this is not part of the material.
Right.
And I'm going to go ahead and bet that no man is going to find a woman where this isn't part of the material either.
No.
I think men are maybe a little more inclined to think that they will for longer because there's less like of that shorter
Or
biological
they'll
arc.
be oblivious to it.
Because
Well,
of
we should
their
come back to what you
power,
just
yeah.
said. But yeah, they'll be oblivious to it because they're not as acutely directly experiencing it. And
Yeah.
sometimes this is why you hear men, like the whole fucking manosphere, I think, is kind of based on a lot of this stuff. You'll hear men just being like, my wife is mean to me and doesn't like me and doesn't like give me sex in the way that
Right.
I've been conditioned to expect that sex should be, and she's like unhappy and our relationship is antagonistic because she's a bitch or whatever, but like all of that
and also
stuff
usually because feminism.
yeah, sure. And then it's almost like the saying of the thing, the calling of these things out becomes the thing that gets attacked by men rather than the thing that is making them fucking suffer as well, which is like the patriarchy. Like instead they're just like,
Right.
shut the fuck up with these complaints that are like negating your very existence and making you want to die.
Basically. Sounds like an overstatement. Sounds hyperbolic. It's not.
Don't talk about those things. And that's like maybe appears to be more of an option that men can imagine than women.
Yeah.
But then some women do that too, right? And then we got the whole fucking trad wife if we went back to traditional gender roles and I just, did what I was told and made Fruit Loops from scratch or whatever they do in those videos. Then
At least
I would
you'd have
be
something to show for it.
happy. Yeah.
Excuse me.
That turned a weird turn. I don't know where that came from.
Check the show notes for scratch fruit.
The one where they're like, first I went out and milked my cows, and then I turned the cows into butter, and then I turned that butter into hydrogenated soybean oil, and then I crafted a rainbow color of dyes based on, mixing different chemical compounds. And then
I think we're learning how much time Alex has spent on a farm. I like that Alex is like, you churned the cows into butter. Alex just doesn't even know.
I'm a trad husband. First I chop wood. Stop right there. Watch me chop wood.
I make the Fruit Loops, you chop the wood.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Trad
We'll
life.
churn the cows.
Yeah. So all of this is basically just leading up to recommending everybody read The Will to Change by Bell Hooks, where I feel like is Bell Hooks a she or a they?
I think she went by she.
Yeah, where she talks about all of this and like the impacts of patriarchy on men from like a very, I think, like super compassionate perspective, that both like calls all the stuff out, but also is like, I don't know, very like caring. But also calls out how women just want men to die.
It's incredible. Since you shared that with me, the bell hooks passage about like the collective female fantasy that men will die and they'll finally be free. Not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about it or haven't noticed a woman referencing it in some oblique way.
Yeah.
Wow.
It like literally made me cry when I read it the first time. Should I just read the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay. This is from the preface to The Will to Change by Bell Hooks. As a young woman in my 20s who had not yet found her own powers, I often wished the men in my life would die. My longing for my father's death began in childhood. It was the way I responded to his rage, his violence. I used to dream him gone, dead and gone. Death was the way out of the fear evoked by the proclamation, "Wait until your father comes home." The threat of punishment was so intense, his power over us so real. Lying in my girlhood bed, waiting to hear the hard anger in his voice, the invasive sound of his commands, I used to think, if only he would die, I could live. Later, as a grown woman waiting for the man in my life to come home, the man who was more often than not a caring partner, but who sometimes erupted into violent fits of rage, I used to think, maybe he will have an accident and die.
Yeah.
Maybe he will not come home and I'll be free to be able to live.
Yeah.
Women and children all over the world want men to die so that they can live. This is the most painful truth of male domination, that men wield patriarchal power in daily life in ways that are awesomely life-threatening, that women and children cower in fear and various states of powerlessness, believing that the only way out of their suffering, their only hope, is for men to die, for the patriarchal father not to come home.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, bummer.
I mean, it's really profound. Remember when you read that to me, I was like, oh, the book that I'm working on has an entire chapter where the main character just fantasizes that all the men have died or disappeared and she's free.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think that there is this like horror at the center of this, that women do want to be free from how this kind of like power manifests like intimately in their lives. But I think men do too.
Yeah, because like imagine like going into every relationship that you have with a woman kind of knowing or fearing that this was the case, that they would be better off without you.
Or that they're so angry at you that they want you on some unconscious level to die. I mean, I think like that is why men are so afraid of women's anger, is because like the anger is, I think, sourced often somewhere in that feeling. And I would argue that this is a particularly like horrifying time to be contemplating that, you know, given what's happening in the political and cultural collective.
Yeah. And then she goes on to talk about like that this sort of makes men obsessed with being useful.
And needed, yeah.
And needed.
Yeah.
And yeah, that definitely like resonates. I mean, it kind of goes back to what I was saying in the first place, like trying to get into these relationships where I feel like all my usefulness or like women's need for me will be affirmed over and over again.
Yeah.
And then feeling like it's only affirmed if I'm doing this certain thing. And it's not affirmed because of like who I actually am as a person, but kind of affirmed because of the like power or safety or choosing that I represent.
I also find that so confusing with men though, because it's like I find this mixed message where they're like, I want to feel needed so I know what place I have in your life and I can feel secure in it, but I don't want to feel so needed that I'm trapped. Right? Like, and the second that I feel any kind of like threatening dependence, emotional, financial, physical, I'll start withdrawing from you. And so it feels like this impossible, like razor's edge to walk.
Yeah. Why is the dependence threatening?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I mean, and maybe that's like more about the experience that I have in dating because I am like pretty independent. And so at first, like, it seems like that's what men are attracted to. But then it also like will make them feel insecure and they don't know why they're needed, especially because like I'm married.
Right.
And then
Right. Why does a fish need two bicycles?
I don't know what you all want from me, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know what you want.
Samesies. Yeah.
And I mean, back to this question of like, why are we doing it? Is it compulsive? I think the other interesting thing about polyamory in my situation is it's not. I don't have to keep dating men, obviously. Like,
Right.
I have had biological children with a man, and I am married to a man, and I have done, that full arc. So if that were the only thing that were drawing women towards men,
Right. Yeah.
What am I
and
doing?
that's what I was saying
Right?
earlier. Like
Right.
every relationship that I'm in right now is with a woman who has done that as well.
well, and it reminds me of a male partner. He and I, as you might imagine, got in a little bit of a tiff about this. It's a sensitive
It's
subject.
always smooth sailing. I'm surprised.
And he was like, what about, how it feels to me to date women who are always like, maybe I'll just stop dating men. He was like, it's not great for like my attachment issues. Like, that doesn't feel good. And I'm like, well, you also just date queer women. So that's going to be part of the specter.
Yeah.
And then as we were going back and forth and it was getting more and more sensitive, he was like, okay, well, how is it though that all of these queer women who are just on the verge of not having relationships with men anymore always have one on retainer, right? There's always some man somewhere that they are keeping on the hook. And I don't know if that's actually true, but I think that there was like something...
Wow, sluts.
I know, sluts. Something interesting in it. And at first glance, I thought, well, I mean, like, maybe it's about proximity to power and safety and, like, having men in your life in, like, a deeply patriarchal society that is becoming even more so helps you feel safe. Have you considered that? But then I was also like, I mean, I think many women, queer women, me, want to see if there is a way to feel authentically close to men. I think we want to feel close to men.
Yeah.
Yes.
And like we are trapped and stuck and suffering, and it feels like really hard to find any interventions to get us closer to each other. But I do think that compulsion exists outside of, I think that desire exists outside of compulsion.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the desire to like forge heterosexual connections is inherent.
Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was just thinking, like, how just depressing and untrue is it to think that the only cause that men and women would have with each other is biological.
Right.
That is just so fucking depressing and untrue. Like, it does feel like such a manipulation that the only reason why men and women would want to be close to each other is because it's either biological or it's like some toxic cultural demand. You know?
Right. Well, and then you do also see, I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but like certainly like masculine, feminine, like interchange shows up in queer, relationships with people who are, the same gender. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Probably more often than not. I don't know. It's like there's something there that is meaningful beyond just the biological or even just like sort of mimicking, iterating the biological. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one is true and interesting, but like we have to put a little bit of a boundary around it because we are talking about relationships where one member of the relationship has gender privilege in the world that the other member of the relationship doesn't have.
Right.
And like that's like kind of some of the inherent material that we're exploring.
Yeah, but like, is that the thing that's the fundamental challenge?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
That is my argument, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I was saying, power.
Yeah. Was that you who were saying that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yes. It was me. Foucault copied that shit from me, actually.
I want to lighten this with some like sexual gossip for a moment.
Okay,
Yes,
cool.
please.
Just because I know this, for me, this stuff gets like kind of heavy and you can forget that we can also be playful with it. Do you remember, Alex? I was thinking about this episode. Some years ago, I'm going to obscure the details. You and I were dating a woman. She was younger than us. And we were all talking about like sexual like fantasies that we had. And it was a little bit like maybe we would do this stuff with each other. Who knows, whatever. And it was right around, I don't know, the height of one of the seasons of The Handmaid's Tale had come out.
Oh, no.
Do you know where this is going, Jessica?
Oh, my God.
Do you know where this is going? And she was like, you know, I actually have a fantasy from that show of being like the young woman being impregnated by the older man while his wife is cradling my head. And I just like, I got up from the table so fast, I feel like I almost knocked it over on everybody. I was like, fuck.
How dare she?
What did you make of that, Sarah?
Well, so I bring it up because the reminder to be playful. Because at first glance and then for some time afterward, I was like, well, I hate that. I hate everything about that. I will not be doing that. And I'm going to pretend that didn't happen. And nobody ever said it. And then in retrospect, you know, for this podcast, I was like, this is like an interesting example of how we try and like play with these norms and explore them and like surface them and pull them kind of like out of the shadow and into the light. And like, you know, I think it's to her credit a little bit. Was it delivered in the most sensitive way ever? No. But
it's perfect. You don't even have to make up a pseudonym to tell this story because you can just refer to her as of Alex.
Of Alex. That's right. That's right. How perfect.
It makes me think about how the like inversion of that in Midsommar, where all the ladies are like pushing the guy, like thrusting the guy into the woman that he's impregnating.
Oh yeah, I love that part. And they're all like moaning in tandem.
Yeah. So in that case, like they have the power, right? It's like the women are just kind of using the man. But they're actually like all of the power resides with like all of the women. And
Right.
like, he's just a vessel.
Yeah.
That one's hot. Anyway, moving on.
So here we are at the end, and I promised our audience that we would not end on a like despairing note, but like have traveled somewhere. Where do you guys think that we've traveled?
I mean, I think just like if you're not thinking about this material, then you're just ignoring it.
And what happens if you're ignoring it?
It's going to show up and fuck your shit up at some point.
Yeah. I think you're right.
And so you maybe don't have to obsess about it for an hour and 13 minutes or whatever we have so far.
Who's counting?
But it's all there. And I think it's the going back to the beginning, the place that I feel alienated in the early stages of relationships is when I can't kind of get the other person to engage with it to the extent that I want to, and to like kind of try to unpack the power dynamics that are at play. And that can feel lonely.
Do you try introducing it to them as like a kink fantasy that can either go the Midsommar route or it can go the Handmaid's Tale route.
That's good.
And just
have
be
them
like, so
choose
of
one.
these two,
Of
which
these two.
resonates
Just
with
send
you
a picture
more?
of the two scenes and then be like, are we doing this one or this one? 2 options on the menu, babe. We need some other people for both of them, but yeah, I don't know. I guess I want to say that like this is the sort of initial premise is like, or I guess you hear this when you tell people that when people who know you're bi hear you complain or like struggle in your relationships with men, and they're just sort of like, why are you still doing it? And I guess like that's a valid question, but I don't know. Is there a reason not to just like give up on it?
Is that the question you're asking me? Okay, so I have like a few
That was just to save myself from being like, ladies don't give up.
few reflections on this.
It's like I'm gonna write an R&B song that is just that's the theme.
Ladies,
Ladies
Ladies don't give up. I know the patriarchy sucks, but ladies don't give up.
That's good. That's good.
Maybe in the club.
Keep singing. I need more time to gather my thoughts.
Nothing else rhymes with that.
Nothing rhymes with club.
Yeah. Besides
No.
sucks and give up.
Sub.
I'm a dom and you're a sub. Maybe in the club.
I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking about, you know, in a moment like this, when we're talking about it and exploring these ideas, it seems obvious to me that we would keep doing it. I'm like, you know, although bell hooks, she wasn't having relationships with men.
She was.
She was.
That's what she's talking about in that fucking book.
She was having sexual relationships with men later in her life.
I just
45.
she is like just that book is like so okay. I've only read like 4 chapters, but so compassionate to her male partner who she references throughout, and is talking about like all the like shitty shit that she's experienced with him, but also being like, but I know that like he was, maybe she's also talking about her brother, and she's like, when I was a kid, my brother was so much more sensitive than me, and I was so much more masculine than him by the traditional measures or whatever, and then he got beaten into being a fucking asshole man by the patriarchy, and like...
Bell Hooks, I know, has a lot of compassion for men and loves men a lot. And I, insofar as I can put myself in league with Bell Hooks in any way, shape, or form, I would say I've seen a lot of myself in her in that way. I really do love men. Like, not just like I love men as a femme, but also I love like the masculine parts of me too, or want to. And I am married to a man, and I am, you know, raising children of many genders, and like
Huge fan of professional wrestling now, apparently.
Right. And that is not going to change. Like, that is so essential to my character. It has always been true. My, you know, closest people, some of the closest people in my life are men and masked people. And so it doesn't feel like an option to like turn that off about myself.
Yeah.
And then that just like leaves this question of, will you be in like sexual, intimate relationships with men and like choose to be in multiple ones? And I think like, again, in moments like this, I'm like, the learning is so compelling. The wanting to understand is so strong that how could I not? And then like in really dark moments, the suffering feels so intense that there's like nothing I wouldn't do in those moments to just escape it, you know? And I think like the question for me is just how can I explore these things, accept that there is suffering inherent in them because of like the material that we have been handed. I will not find a relationship where this suffering, with a man where this suffering doesn't exist. But is there a way to be in relationship with that doesn't feel like I'm doing more damage to myself and to the men. You know, like I think that's the question for me. Like maybe I can accept some of this suffering for like the learning and the love that's inherent in it if I just like knew how to make sure we weren't hurting each other more. And maybe in my darkest moments, I'm not sure of that piece.
Yeah. And I think that is like a question for society as a whole right now, right? Like you see a lot more gender divisions than there ever have been, like certainly politically. And you can see like people of younger generations either like receding away from either traditional gender identities or like heterosexual relationships, but also just like questioning the like fundamentals of those identities, I guess, right? Like being like seeing like it sucks to be a man, it sucks to be a woman, like young people don't want to be either of those things,
right? And it sucks to be queer in the rise of like a fascist patriarchal like psycho regime that is criminalizing you.
Yeah, and probably because of everything I just said, they're fucking terrified of that, right? They want us to keep doing that same shit for some fucking reason.
I wonder.
So maybe the conclusion is not that we should keep doing it.
Well, okay. One last attempt at this, and then I will let us just live in some tension around this, and that's going to be okay.
Yeah.
I also think that there might be some relief in like offering this back up to the collective. That maybe one of the things that is kind of inherently toxic about the way we think and talk about this stuff is it's like in these really isolated units of two.
Being individualized.
It's being really individualized. And so it feels like shameful and claustrophobic and like scary and desperate.
Right. And everybody thinks everybody else's relationship is fine.
Right.
But then this woman starts studying it at UC Santa Barbara and it's like, nope, not fine. And everybody's like, yeah, I'll sign up for that class. This is also my experience.
Straights are not okay.
Yeah.
And like, what if we let the collective hold some of this more, you know, and like bell hooks again as a kind of inspiration here that like, this is not something we have to experience alone. And this is not something that we have to experience in shame or in isolation, but it is like part of the challenging material that we have all inherited. And we are not going to fix it inside of like tiny little units of two, right? We have to fix it in the collective.
Yeah.
And the units of two, like, or more, are reflections of what's happening in the collective, you know? But like, I am reminded of a colleague of mine who always would tell me when I got kind of overwhelmed by some of this type of material and beyond, they would be like, just remember to immerse yourself in water or like lay on the dirt. Remember to give some of this back to the bigger picture here. And I think there's like some wisdom in that. Got to give some of this back to the bigger collective and ask us to work through some of this material together.
Well, and I think like for men, that is also like work through some of this material with other men.
Yeah.
Talk to talk about your problems in relationships with women to other men.
Yes.
And I think there's like almost like a weird kind of like taboo against that because there's a cliche of like that would be like end up being misogynist somehow or something like that. But I think that it's like super important and it's fucking hard to do. It's like hard to, and then that's just like men doing the same thing of feeling like lonely and isolated and like not knowing how to work through these things and then just like trying to handle that in isolation rather than like articulating it to somebody else who might have like the same experience or directing it towards your female partner and like trying to work it out with her, but like she's fucking subject to, you know,
her nervous system is already overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think like finding people, the two things that we've kind of come up with here and maybe more is like find people who are interested in it and like really want to engage with it directly. And then also like give some of it back to the collective. These things will not be solved in tiny isolated units. They will be solved together.
Yeah.
And like we need to trust that and maybe build that muscle a little more.
Cool.
That's so, yeah, you guys, you did it. You made me feel a tiny little bit of hope. Thank you.
Thank fucking God. I'm glad. Thanks for talking about hard stuff with me, you too, and also everybody else out there. I appreciate it. And it's like, we are in this together. And maybe I'll remember that the next time I'm like in the bottom of a spiral.
Yeah.
I'm not in that spiral alone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for
Thanks.
listening to Mistakes Were Made. Follow us on Instagram at MistakesCast so that you can find out when new episodes are coming out. And you can see cute pictures of us and our cats and our Easter bits.
Yours.
Oh, yeah.
And also subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you like to use.
Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody.
Thanks.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.